From the very beginning, the entire Oufia affair was wrapped in controversy. Why would General de Rovigo go to the extent of exterminating an entire tribe and executing its leaders over the petty crime of robbery, especially when it was unequivocally proven that the Oufia had no hand in the incident? Could it be that the Duke had ulterior motives pushing him towards such a heinous carnage? Let us investigate. Oufia was described by PDC as a small nomadic tribe camped a short distance from La Maison Carrée. Baron Pichon concurs, calling them a friendly tribe which had come to place itself since our arrival in Algiers under the protection of La Maison Carrée, who supplied this post with small provisions, who received officers and soldiers daily. Wilhelm Schimper adds that the tribe had since then lived in peace with the French. If the Oufia indeed small, friendly, living under the protection of the French blockhouse and even supplying provisions to its garrison, then it was neither hostile nor a threat to colonial authority. Quite the contrary, it had every interest in maintaining good relations with the French. Robbing their guests would make no sense. On the other hand, this also meant Oufia was an easy and wealthy prey. Sources also indicate that brigandry was rampant around the blockhouses, particularly near Maison Carrée, where both legionnaires and Oufia were stationed. But this did not necessarily mean Oufia members were guilty. French legionnaires themselves were often accused of such acts. Wilhelm Schimper, in an attempt to exonerate the tribe, wrote,
"One can rightly assume that the many assassinations that occurred in that area were not always committed by the Bedouins, but partly by these soldiers. I often went out alone far beyond the outposts and several times encountered soldiers of the Foreign Legion who were out for a walk without weapons, but had banded together to rob the Bedouins who were returning from the market with some money. This is not an idle speculation on my part. Rather, these people themselves told me of their plans quite carelessly."
Schimper even recounts how he himself was the victim of a robbery attempt by 2 legionnaires and how another French soldier proposed to him to assassinate anyone he wanted for money. It is therefore entirely possible, even likely, that the French soldiers were behind the robbery. Yet, de Rovigo conveniently ordered an immediate attack on Oufia, almost as if he had been waiting for such an excuse. He did not bother investigating who the true culprits were. Baron Pichon's testimony suggests that de Rovigo may have even anticipated the aggression against Farhat's deputies, or at least expected it. The civil intendant later wrote,
"We were almost certain on the day of the deputies' departure that they would be arrested. The Duke had spoken to me in this sense on the 5th, the day of their departure."
But the punishment de Rovigo had originally mentioned was very different. Pichon explained reproachfully,
"He had still informed in advance of the measures he would take if this happened. They were very different from those that were taken. It was only a matter of arresting all the El Oufias that were found in the markets until restitution. I was going out early in the morning, on the 6th, to confer with Mr. de Rovigo about my apprehensions, when Captain Leblanc, arriving very worried, came to tell me, 'What the general had foreseen has happened.'"
Pichon then asked a damning question.
"With this forecast, could not the deputies have been escorted by the lieutenant of the Aga?"
In other words, if de Rovigo knew the emissaries would be robbed, why didn't he protect them? So to recap, de Rovigo showered the emissaries with gifts, made a spectacle of their departure, and then sent them unescorted through territories he already suspected were dangerous. This strongly suggests that he might have orchestrated the robbery, or at the very least waited for such an incident in order to create a pretext to annihilate Oufia. But why would he go so far as to exterminate the entire tribe? Surely a simple demand for reparations or a punitive fine would have sufficed. The answer is simple: greed. He wanted Oufia's riches. The tribe possessed thousands of head of livestock. wealth that could fill the army's coffers and enrich his administration. Hermann Haber, one of the German legionnaires, exposed this hidden motive directly.
In my opinion, not one of the least important motives of the massacre was to supply the city and army with cattle, in which that tribe was known to be very rich, and to supply its indebted coffers with money.
The evidence supports Haber's claim. Baron Pichon listed the booty as 1,500 to 2,000 sheep, 600 to 700 oxen, 25 to 30 camels, not including the horses and other cattle that soldiers kept for themselves at Maison Carrée. Pichon explained that this loot was sold at absurdly low prices, 5 francs per sheep, 20 francs per ox, and 100 francs per camel. In today's money, 1 French franc of the 1830s is equivalent to about $54 US. By this conversion, Oufia's livestock alone was worth nearly $1 million in modern terms, and that is a conservative estimate. To put it plainly, Oufia was exterminated for profit. Further evidence supports this. A few days after the massacre, a deputation from another tribe came to Algiers to reclaim part of the stolen livestock, insisting that Oufia had merely been its guardians. De Rovigo categorically refused to return anything, insisting on keeping all stolen animals. Even stranger was what happened next. Instead of holding a public auction, as was expected, De Rovigo quietly sold the cattle to the Danish consul. Many French merchants who had traveled in hopes of bidding were outraged. They turned to the civil intendant for help. But once again, De Rovigo refused to reconsider his decision. Taken together, these facts strongly suggest that the Oufia massacre was not about justice or security or even revenge, it was about wealth. De Rovigo had his eyes on the tribe's fortune and seized upon a convenient pretext to wipe them out and take it. In France, the silence was deafening. No outrage from the press, no condemnation from the authorities. The massacre of Oufia was swallowed by indifference. Instead of reprimand, the French crown responded with a gesture that amounted to an endorsement. On May 12, 1832, barely a month after the massacre, King Louis-Philippe issued a new order that stripped Baron Pichon of any real authority and placed the civil intendant under the direct orders of the general-in-chief. This was no accident, it was a signal. The king had chosen the path of brutality. Rovigo was now free to accelerate his merciless policy, opening the door to a dark chapter in Algerian history, one marked by fire, blood, and mass killings. But France had miscalculated. The massacre of Oufia was not the end of a tribe, it was the birth of memory, and memories are dangerous to empires. Oufia's destruction revealed to all Algerians the true face of colonialism. It showed that no treaty, no submission, no cooperation would shield them from the claws of conquest. The men, women, and children of Oufia, slaughtered in their tents, suffocated in the swamps, impaled on the lances of horsemen, became martyrs in the national consciousness. The intention of Rovigo's terror was to silence, but it achieved the opposite. Algerians scattered in tribes and regions began to see a common truth. The only hope for survival was unity. The massacre of Oufia ignited in them a fire, a determination that resistance was not just a choice, but a duty. From that moment on, the French army was not facing isolated tribes, it was facing a united people, a united nation.